Hey everybody! This week I thought I would show a video on how to throw off the hump. This is a great useful technique for when you want to throw smaller pieces and you want to throw them pretty fast. It allows you to relatively center a small amount of clay, and this part can stay pretty much uncentered until you pull up the clay to use it. I really like using this to make teacups and saucers and small mugs because you just don't have to try to center a small piece of clay every time. Okay, so I'm going to get started. So I'm going to pat this down, this big ball of clay down. If it's too uncentered at the bottom, it will cause your hand to move, and that does make it a little bit harder to center that small piece of clay at the top. So I'm going to get this pounded down, and I'm going to just get it basically where it's not moving like this, but I'm not going to center this part. I'm going to start centering this part, okay? So with this big a piece of clay, just to move it a little bit, I'm going to need pretty good amount of water, and then also I'm going to need a pretty good amount of speed. So if you like to use a lot of speed with your wheel, now is the time. Okay, so you can see that down here, there's a lot of uncenteredness. But I've gotten it to the point where it's not making my hands move like crazy. So that way I can actually pull up a small amount of clay right here and center it. So that's what I'm going to do. So you're going to need a little water, and I'm just going to start to collar right here. Okay, so this is the piece I'm getting ready to center. So what I'm going to do is just use my left hand, this part of my left hand, to cup that piece of clay like that. And then this hand's going to get in the way for you to see. So I'm just going to let you look at that for a second. I'm just cupping here, and then I'm going to make a fist, and I'm going to start to press down, keeping this hand really solid. I'm bracing it against my hip, and we're going to press down. And so the clay can't move that way because my hand is in the way. And so if I stay centered here, so does my clay. Okay, so I'm going to kick again, and I'm just going to do that again. So again, we're going to add water, and I'm going to cup and just press down using my hip to keep things steady. And I can start to feel the clay shift. What people don't understand a lot when you're doing this kind of throwing off the hump is and also just centering in general, if you will stay centered yourself and cup your hands and press and hold until the clay shifts to you, you can actually feel when that happens. A lot of centering can be just simply holding the clay and staying centered yourself. Okay, so I think my piece is pretty centered. I'm going to go one more time just to make sure. Okay, a little bit more water. And again, I'm cupping, and I'm going to press down. The clay is not allowed to go anywhere because my cupped hand is holding it in place. And then I'm just going to gently take your hands off. If you take your hands off too fast, you can cause your piece to become uncentered again. Okay, so now that this is centered, and you can obviously see that this is not, I'm going to start going in to make my little teacup, which is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to make teacups and saucers. Okay. So you have to be careful when you start to go inside of the clay. You got to be careful that you don't go past here because you're going to go into uncentered territory, which is bad news. So you kind of can make a little ridge here just to remind yourself not to go down further than that. Okay. So I made my little ridge, and now I'm going to press 2 fingers in using this part of my hand, and these 2 fingers on top, the 2 middle fingers of each hand. I'm going to press down and come back. And then again, I'm going to get a little more water, press down and pull back. And right now, if you look where my thumb is, this is where I am inside, okay? So I'm not going to go too much further because I don't want to hit that uncharted, uncentered territory. Okay, so we're going to press down and pull back. There. And one more time. Press down and pull back. Now, I'm making a teacup, which means that the bottom of my cup is going to look like a cup. It's not going to be squared off, so it'll be like this on the bottom. So I'm making that happen right now, so it's a little lower in the middle and a little higher on the sides, so I can make a nice foot. Okay, so now I'm going to start to pull up, and I'm going to use the same technique that I usually do. I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm going to start to pull up the side. Okay. And when I get to the top, I'm going to pack my rim using these 2 fingers and just a finger on top, just keeping that nicely packed. Because teacups are generally pretty thin, especially at the rim. And so I want that thin rim, but I'm not going to put that in place quite yet. All right, and again, making sure to honor the shape of the bottom. I'm going to go down from the bottom and pull up to the middle. Okay, like that. So now it's pretty thin all the way through. So now I'm going to start to pull from the bottom to the top. Just kind of cleaning up a little bit, wanting to see the shape. I'm going to start creating the shape too. So I'm going to give one last pull, and then I'm going to create the shape. So I'm going to pull from the bottom to the top. Notice how slow my fingers are moving. I let the wheel go around all the way around. Excuse me. I let the wheel go all the way around once before I start to pull up each time I pull. Very, very slow. Up to the rim and pack. Packing the rim there. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to start to make the shape. So I'm going to make a very traditional teacup today. So it's just going to be shaped about like that. So it's going to be a little wider at the top than the bottom. So that means I'm going to start from the middle, and I'm going to start pulling this area out towards me. So I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm just going to start to pull gently, opening the cup. Packing the rim again. I'm not ready to create that rim yet. Excuse me. Now I'm going to go from the bottom to the middle, and I'm going to pull this out a little bit too. Like that. So it's nice and pretty, nice and gentle. And that's a nice shape, but I'm going to want, for me today, I want a straight line. So I'm going to pull this part out to meet this rim. So here we go. We're just pulling towards me and up. Again, not quite ready to create the rim yet. I want a little bit more gentle slope here, so I'm going to work on that for a second. So again, we're just going to pull out, up. Just creating the shape like that. Okay, so now I'm going to use my rib. It's a little dirty, sorry about that. I usually try to clean my tools. Okay, so I'm going to use my rib, and I'm going to pull the shape more with my rib. So I'm just using my hand inside for support as I'm pulling up and towards me, creating a nice gentle shape like that. Oops, I just made it wobble. Did you see how fast I took my hand off the piece? That threw it off center. You can tell. So don't do that. Be gentle when you take your hands off your pot. Just got distracted. So there we go. Just pushed it right back into center. Okay, now I'll put more, excuse me, water on there. So I'm going to start to pull that off. Just like that. Okay. I'm going to take all the water off the bottom. And now's the time where I'm going to define the bottom. So I'm going to start looking at the bottom inside and joining up my finger on the outside. So I'm right here on the inside. Do you see that line that I made? I want a nice foot. So I'm going to give myself a generous amount of clay down there. So I'm going to press this uncentered clay down and make a ridge and give myself plenty of room for a nice foot. Okay. And I'm going to cut that off in 1 second. The last thing that I do, once I get everything taken care of, is I'm going to create my rim. And it's going to be a very fine rim. Okay, so I'm going to clean up my hands so that I don't have anything that might catch on the rim, because once I do this rim, it's done. I don't want to touch it anymore. So I'm just going to add a little bit of water, and I'm going to pinch. There needs to be a little water on the outside too. There we go. And I'm going to pinch and pack, but I'm pinching up into a point. You see that nice little soft rim? It's going to feel really good to drink a cup of tea out of this cup. So now I'm just going to clean it up just a bit, get all the sludge off. And there's our teacup. Okay, so now Stephanie has a tool that she uses that I haven't seen yet, that she uses to cut from the throwing on the hump. I'm curious about that tool, but I don't have one as of yet, so I'm going to use my wire tool, wrapping just like dental floss. I'm going to put it down. I'm going to feel for that ridge. I'm going to put it down and pull gently back towards me. And again, this is going to give me a nice, generous amount of clay to make a foot. Okay, so when you're going to take this off the wheel, you're going to want to be really careful. This is so thin that if I stick my finger in there, it's going to go all the way through, number one. Number two is if I pull up from here, I'm going to distort the shape of the cup. But since I left so much clay down here, I can just gently pinch this up, keeping the shape just like that, and place it gently on your board in front of you, right? Okay, now I'm going to start making the saucer that's going to join this little cup here. A lot of people will make a saucer and they'll use calipers and they'll make the inside part of the cup to settle, the inside part of the saucer where you settle and nestle the cup in. They'll make it with calipers in this situation. What I do is I make the piece, the saucer, with the nestling part, the lower part, where you nestle your cup down into. And I make that when I make that here, and then when I trim, I use the calipers to match this foot up with the saucer that I'm getting ready to make. So I do it a little bit opposite, but I find that it works better for me that way. So I'm going to make a saucer. I'm not using calipers to measure. I'm just going to go ahead and make it, and then I will trim this cup to match this saucer. Okay, so again, we're just going to pull up a small amount of clay. I'm just going to start using my hip, and we're just going to pull. Now we're going to pull up a smaller amount of clay for the saucer because a saucer is smaller. And I'm just going to pull up about this much. Okay, that's actually a little bit much. I'm going to push that down a little bit. That's pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to push this uncentered clay down and out of my way. And it's going to give you a little tussle now and then because, like I said, it's not centered. So it might pop your hand up and down a little bit. That's why I like to push it way down so it doesn't bother me as I'm centering this piece. Okay? All right, so again, I'm going to cut my hand here, and I'm going to push down, and this cup of a hand will not let this clay go anywhere. So it's going to have to form itself into my center. Okay, so I'm going to use my hip and I'm just pressing down and holding. Don't forget to breathe. And again, you can use your hand any way that it works for you. A lot of times I use a fist, but then sometimes I'll open up into kind of a blade shape of my hand. It just starts to, you start to feel it, how the clay needs your hand to be. Okay, and that's pretty good. Again, I'm going to push this down because it's getting in my way. I want a good amount of space between my hand and this uncentered piece of clay so my hand doesn't go up and down. All right, now I'm going to center again. Just cupping, holding, pressing. Okay, that's pretty centered. You know, a lot of times as you start going on in clay, it's not as necessary to get totally centered. You can kind of fudge it a little. And this is pretty close. Okay. Now, again, I'm going to go ahead and make my line that I don't want to go any further than that, right there. And I'm going to pull that up like that. And just hold for a second. I'm just checking. Yep, we got center. Okay. So to make a saucer, it's a little bit different. I'm going to widen this. So I'm pressing down with these two fingers and squeezing with this thumb. And I'm going to press this out. So I have a wider piece to work with. So I'm just pressing. I'm squeezing and pressing with this hand. Okay. So this is just going to give us a little bit of a wider place to work. Good. See? Okay. So I'm going to clean up my hands so I can see what I'm doing. Keep a lot of towels handy when you're throwing, because you just, at some points of throwing, you need clean hands so you can see what's happening. Okay, I'm going to add a little water, and I'm going to start to push down and pull back like that. And again, being very aware of this limit. Got a little dry there. Okay, so make sure you have enough water. Okay, so I've gone down and pulled back. I've gone in here and pulled back enough. I have space to make my little hole here for my teacup, but I'm not going to do that quite yet. I'm going to pull this wall out first. So I'm going to start where my finger hits that wall, and I'm going to start to pull towards myself. These fingers pinching, thumb underneath pinching and pulling, making sure to go nice and slow. Packing the rim when you get to the end. And we're going to do that one more time. So thumb down here, making sure we're not going too far down. I'm going to start to pull towards myself. And all the way out to the end. And then packing my rim. The rim is the last thing I'm going to do. Okay. Now I'm going to start going in to make my hole for the teacup. So I'm just going to start to press down with two fingers and pull back. There we go. Okay. Now, that's a little, with the shrinkage amount of this white clay, that's a little small. So I'm going to pull out just a little bit further. Okay, so I'm just going to pull just a little bit further there. Okay. And I'm just going to push that little ridge that comes up. I'm just going to push that down. Okay, and I'm going to clean this up so we can see what we're doing. And I like my little cup to be pretty deep. I like my cup to feel very secure when I settle it down into its home. So I'm going to go ahead and push down and pull back again. Did y'all see that? Can you see that? There's an air pocket in there. I'm going to pop it. It's being a little fussy. Oh, come on now. All right, I'm going to pop it with my needle tool because I don't want to go too much further down. I'm worried that I will run into uncharted, uncentered territory. So I poked my needle tool into the hole, into the pocket, making holes. And now I'm just going to push my fingers, yep, and it just pops. So there we go, we got that done. Okay, so now I'm going to put my fingers back and forth. Notice how I'm going back and forth across the bottom. I want it to be nice and packed down there. And you want it to be very straight, because if it's up or down or you have a finger mark in there, it'll upset your teacup when you settle your teacup in there. So you want to make sure it's nice and flat. Okay, and now I'm going to put my, this is hard to describe. I keep my nails really, really short. I'm going to take my middle fingernail, right, and I'm going to put my finger down right here, just like that. And I'm causing it to create a right angle right there. You see how sharp that is? And that'll give my cup a nice place to rest. Okay, so we've curved up the rim just a little bit in working on this piece. So I'm going to start to flatten this saucer down. I think I'm going to reduce my speed a little bit because we're getting pretty thin and I don't want it to start to flop around. Okay, so I'm going to pinching with thumb underneath and pulling towards me. The great thing about throwing off the hump is that if there's a lot of extra clay right here, that's okay, because you can trim it off. Throwing off the hump is all about trimming. So I think my next video will be tomorrow, and I'm going to show y'all how to trim and put handles on for your teacups and saucers. So that would be a good video to make. When you're thinking about a saucer, think about what's going on the saucer. For those of you who don't drink tea, I'll go through it. So usually when you get a teacup and with your tea bag in there, you have a little spoon that's either in your cup or on the side. Okay, so on this little platter here, we're going to have our teacup. Eventually, we're going to have our tea bag and our spoon. So you want to make it big enough that you can rest all that stuff together gently and it feels comfortable. And you also want to make it so that when you pick your teacup up out of its little home, the spoon doesn't go clattering down. So you want this to be pretty flat. So I'm going to make that happen, and then we're going to do the rim and we'll be done. Okay, so I'm just adding a little water, and I'm going to add a little water back here. Now, if you notice, I should be saying slip because my water has become slip. If you'll let your water sit around with clay in it on your shelf, it's going to smell. But it turns into slip, and that gives you a lot more plasticity when you're throwing. It also helps your clay stand because you're not throwing just raw water onto your piece. It's water filled with clay, and so your piece doesn't fall apart as fast. Just a tip. If you want it to stop smelling, you can add peroxide to it, and then it cuts all the bacteria out, which is what's happening in your slip. That's why, and so it won't smell anymore. So I know peroxide is hard to get right now, but if you can get any and you want to keep slip on your shelf, it'll help your throwing, I promise. My teacher, Tony, he had the oldest, stinkiest slip that he threw with. Okay, so I'm going to start to pull and flatten. Okay, and that's that. Now, this is a little bit more difficult to get this thing off of this hump. I think I saw at Art Alliance that y'all had some of those scrapers. I don't know. I find those harder than actually just using my hands. So I'm going to make this, I'm going to try to get most of the slip off this piece. And I'm going to make the rim. And then I'm going to take this thing off. And I hope that I don't fail miserably and not do it well. So anyway, we'll see what happens. Okay, I'm going to take the slip off down here. Oh, this one looks a little bit dicey. Okay, well, if I fail, I fail. You can throw for 30 years and still have mass fails all the time. So I'm just going to make my rim, and so I'm just pinching it just ever so gently. Okay, and then I'm going to run my sponge like that, just gently closing it around the rim. I'm going to clean up just a little bit here and a little bit here. Okay, so now I'm going to take my rib and I'm going to make a line down here that my clay is going to go, that my wire tool is going to go through. And this helps guide your wire tool, because I'm sure everybody has made a plate and pulled your wire tool up through the plate before. That's why I always make a little ridge, because it allows my tool to stay where it's supposed to. Okay. All right, now. All right, I hope I make this happen. Wrapping my wire tool. I'm going to leave a little bit of extra space because this is so wide. Okay. All right. Here we go. And I'm just reaching in here. I'm just going to pinch. Ooh, like that, right? And lay it ever so gently down onto my board. Ha! I did it. Yay. Okay. So, I'm going to finish throwing off this hump, but I'm going to put it in fast. So, if you want to stop the video now, you can. If you want to continue to watch me finish this hump, I'll speed it up. So, and I'm not going to talk, so you can just watch it with speed and see that happen. Okay. And since I'm not going to talk again, y'all have a great week. I'll see you. Okay, here I said I wasn't going to talk again, but I thought this might be a really good place to show you how I finish up this piece. Now, this piece is probably a pound and a half of clay, which is really manageable to center. So I'm going to center this whole piece now and use it to throw a cup and one more cup and one more saucer. So I'm just going to make this ridge here, and then I'm just going to start to center the whole piece. I'm just going to make a ridge here, and I'm just going to try to push all this clay together. A lot of times too, if I've made as many cups and saucers as I want to, I'll just use this time to make just one piece, whatever that may be. A plate, usually because the clay's pretty low to the bat when I get started, but I just pushed it all up. So I'm going to go ahead and make one more cup and one more saucer. All right, guys, this is finally it. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.